All right, let's get started. So thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Emily Rogan, and I'm the Senior Program Officer for the nonprofit organization United Policyholders. We are here today to present to you a training for renters specifically called Preparedness Tips from the Trenches. So the first thing I always like to start off and say is that United Policyholders, that's me. United Policyholders is a nonprofit organization. We don't take any money from insurance companies and we don't sell insurance. We are a voice and an information for insurance consumers in all 50 states. We have insurance subject matter expertise, both on the buying side of buying insurance, the claim side, and then also legal rights as it affects, policyholders, the people. We are supported by donations from individuals, businesses, grants from community foundations, and we do not take any money from insurance companies. So all the money that comes in allows us to be able to give presentations like this that help you navigate buying insurance and claims help if you need it with a true source. We also often speak up in the media. So we are used as a resource to give the consumer side. So often, the insurance company has their lobbyists and PR departments, but, we are the nonprofit that will talk to the media about how it really affects everyday people. And then we also serve as a voice for consumers in courts of law, the legislature, and public policy forums as well. We've been doing this work for 30 years, and again, we empower people to prepare, rebuild, and recover from disasters, and we provide subject matter expertise to our long-term recovery partners after disasters. We keep an eye on the insurance marketplace and work with public officials to strengthen laws for policyholders, and we stand up for consumer rights, as I mentioned. We've done quite a bit of work in Colorado. It was very fun to go through the photo archives and see, all the projects that we have done in the state. We are a national organization based in California, but we have done quite a bit in all of our 3 programs in Colorado. So through our Roadmap to Recovery program, which is our post-disaster program, we worked the 4 Mile Canyon fire in 2010 in Boulder County, the High Park and Woodlands Heights fire, Waldo Canyon, the Black Forest fire. Those 2 were down in Colorado Springs, and then the flooding that happened after in 2013. We're also keeping an eye on the wildfires right now that are burning outside Boulder and up near Larimer County as well. With all the work after disasters, we were able to pass the Colorado Homeowners Insurance Reform Act in 2013 with our advocacy program. And then now we are here helping people prepare for disasters, prepare by helping make sure that your insurance safety net is what you need it to be through our Roadmap to Preparedness program. And this presentation, Tips from the Trenches, is brought to you by a grant from the Denver Urban Area Security Initiative, and we're coordinating and partnering with Jefferson County to bring this presentation to you. So a big thank you to everyone who's helping us present this training to you. Okay, so our tips from the trenches. What that means is, on the ground, after disasters, we see that it is insurance money that is the #1 source that helps people rebuild and recover after disasters. It helps people make the decisions to get where they're going to live, and that is that pot of money that really matters. Oftentimes, if it's a big enough disaster, FEMA will come in and help, but those are needs-based grants, and they're up to $35,000. But the average amount of a FEMA grant is really $5,000. So, insurance money is the pot that will help you replace your belongings, help you figure out your next steps. And that's kind of what we're going to go along with today, is how can you build an insurance safety net that is right for you. There are also SBA loans, which means the Small Business Administration loans that are available after disasters, but they do need to be repaid. And then again, there's charitable aid from wonderful, Red Cross, Suchi Foundation. There are always a lot of nonprofits on the ground, but really they cover basic and emergency needs. So renter's insurance, your rental insurance, your renter's policy, what it will cover is your belongings. It will cover additional living expenses until you can relocate. And it's really important because it is separate from your landlord's policy. The number one thing we want you to take away from this is that your landlord's policy will not cover your belongings. You will not get any money from your landlord's insurance policy. You have to buy something separate called a renter's insurance policy, and that is how you will get money if something happens to your home. And so what we want you to know is that it is a bargain compared to most kinds of insurance. And it's the best way to make sure that you'll have cash on hand if something happens. And most importantly, it gives you breathing room to figure out the next steps. If there's been, whether it's, a fire in the apartment next to you and you get smoke damage in your unit and you have to live somewhere else, or whether, it's something even more serious and the whole, building goes down, it's really renter's insurance that is that money that you will need. It also comes in handy if someone breaks into your place and steals some of your stuff. If you're robbed while traveling, obviously we're not traveling a lot anymore, and we're also not having guests a lot in our house anymore. So the 2 bullet points are more applicable, pre-COVID, but the first 2 still apply. So it will cover you if someone breaks in and takes your belongings, or there is damage from a natural disaster or a house fire. But it does not cover you if you intentionally damage something in your home, if an earthquake damages or destroys your home. And in Colorado, that may be different. So one of the things we're going to be going over is really taking a look at what is covered and what isn't. And flood damage is not covered. So you want to go into buying insurance with your eyes open, knowing what it covers and knowing what it doesn't. So if you do not currently have renter's insurance and you're shopping for it, what you want to do is create an inventory of your belongings. Oftentimes, I hear a lot of people say like, oh, well, my stuff isn't worth that much. I don't know if I'm going to get it because, I got a lot of it secondhand. But, when you've lost everything, you are replacing all of your belongings, and it does cost money to be able to replace those things. So it adds up. So we want you to create a basic inventory of your belongings. And this is a really, we will go into making a home inventory and what that entails. But if you just can't sleep at night one time and you just try and remember everything that's in your bedroom, close your eyes and think of everything that's in your bedroom, it adds up. All of those pieces add up. So you want to have some sort of sense of how much would it cost to replace your stuff. We want you to do a home inventory, which is taking pictures of your belongings or a video and store it in a safe place. And then thinking about the local risks, and that might be different for everybody. Maybe you are somewhere where the wildfires are a little too close for comfort right now, or maybe you live in an apartment that is on the first floor, or maybe below grade, and it has a risk of flooding. Really think about what are your local risks. What kinds of disasters do you want to cover? So that's an important part of this, is figuring out what you need that's specific for you. And then shop around. We want you to compare apples to apples, meaning the same kinds of coverage. So the same amounts, which you're going to get an estimate for. And one thing to do is you can start with your auto insurer, because if you have insurance for your car, it may not be as expensive to add your renter's insurance policy onto there. But we do want you to get 2 other quotes as well, just to make sure that you understand what's out there. Always ask for discounts. Ask them if if you have a home security, if you have like a Ring doorbell or some sort of home security, that might be something. If you're close to a fire station or a fire hydrant, and then non-smoker is a common discount as well. There are all these discounts that you want to be able to ask an insurance agent about if you qualify. Then ask them if there's a discount that you haven't mentioned that there might be. So really, like go through it so that you can get as much savings in the discounts that they're offering as possible. We want you to customize your safety net. So we'll make sure that all of your, if you have something that's very valuable or a collection, or if you're working from home and you have a lot of business equipment there right now, these are things that you will need to customize within your policy. And then we also want you to know that if you raise your deductible, and we'll go into what a deductible is and how it works, but if you have a higher deductible, that is one way that you can lower the cost. So what really matters is knowing what your deductible is. With renter's insurance, it's usually a dollar amount, and I'll show you some examples of that in a little bit. But knowing that amount so that you don't file claims if you're not going to get anything out of the policy, if it's a low claim, and I'll go over a few examples of that shortly. What matters is that you have as much of loss of use, it's also called additional living expense coverage, that you can buy if they're offering different levels of that. You want to make sure you have something called replacement cost coverage for your belongings. That's a really important one because that means that the policy will give you the amount it will cost to replace your belongings instead of what you could have sold it for before it was damaged or destroyed. So the actual cash value is, you can kind of think of it like the Craigslist value, but when something's been lost, you really want that replacement cost coverage because you're going to be going out and replacing it. And then scheduling your valuables. We talked a little bit about that on the last slide, and scheduling is the insurance lingo for making sure that something, whether it's your collections or business property or something valuable, is specifically listed on your policy so that you get that full amount. And oftentimes, people, it could be something for jewelry, but if you lost that one piece of jewelry, you would be able to get that full amount. And then exclusions, it matters what is not covered in your policy as well. And oftentimes, there's flood damage that's not covered, sometimes damage from mold, terrorism, earthquake damage may or may not be covered. You want to take a look in the policy, and water damage too. So usually water damage, you think of it as if it was an accident, it would be covered, but if it's a slow leak, it may not be. So, all policies have a little bit different language, so it's important to know exactly what you're buying and what's in your renter's insurance policy. And then here is a renter's insurance comparison shopping guide. It's just this worksheet that we created that is really important because it allows you to shop and compare apples to apples. So put in a dollar amount and make sure that you're getting quotes for the same amount of coverage, because that's the only way you can really compare the price, because we don't want to shop just on price. We want to shop for coverage as well. And this is available on our website, and I'll be sure to email it out to everybody afterwards so that you have a sample of it. And then, in the center piece is add earthquake insurance. I would also urge you to add, consider adding flood insurance if that is one of the risks in your area. So this is what a sample policy will look like if you purchase it. If you already do have renter's insurance, this is what we want you to pull out and just make sure that you have what you need. You can see that there is personal property right here, and then there's that loss of use amount too. So that is where you have those amounts. As we were talking about earlier, it is fairly affordable. This policy here was only $150 for the whole year for the premium, but the coverage limits are extremely low. So, and we'll talk a little bit more about why that matters. And then down here, you see the deductible. That's an important piece too. So here is a comparison. They have the same, so your policy may look like the one we just showed. It may look a little different, but what you'll see is that you have the same buckets of coverage there. And then how deductibles work, it's kind of, you can think of it as the out-of-pocket amount before your insurance kicks in. So you don't actually have to pay your deductible, but your claim is the amount of damage minus that deductible. So, and that's important because you don't want to file a claim if you're not necessarily going to get anything from your insurance company. So I have two examples here. So the first one is if you have, and we're going to go with the scenario of if you have a $500 deductible. And if someone comes in and they, if you're robbed and they take, you know, your bike, your laptop, some other things that are valuable, and they steal about, you know, $2,000 worth of stuff from you. If you file a claim with your insurance company and you had a $500 deductible, the amount your insurance company would give you is $1,500. So the amount that it would cost of your claim minus your deductible. You know, so the second scenario is if someone came in and they only stole $400 worth of stuff. If you still have that $500 deductible, you wouldn't necessarily want to file a claim because the amount does not exceed that $500, so you wouldn't get anything back from your insurance company. And it's really important as we go over these scenarios, especially when we're talking about theft, to remember that your insurance company requires you to write down every single thing you had and then put a value on it. And there is some negotiation that happens there. So it's good advice to make sure that you have that home inventory that we talked about so that you can refer back to the belonging and say, oh, this is, you know, this is about how much it costs. Oh, I can show you an example of what it looks like. And then here's how much it would cost to replace that belonging. So, you know, unfortunately, filing a claim can be a bit of a negotiation. And so, you know, our advice as consumer advocates is make sure you have as much documentation as you can beforehand to make the process go a little smoother at claim time. Okay, so your coverage C. So you want to make sure that you, again, insure your contents for replacement values. Consider scheduling anything important, and then also be aware that there are often sublimits within your policy too. And those are things such as jewelry and business equipment that have limits on each category of item. So another piece of advice, again, is that home inventory. And so it's really important that whatever you do, you save it in a safe place so that you'd be able to access it. You know, you can take a lot of photos, or you can use your iPhone and just take a video. Usually, I would have to do that update of my home inventory. Often, if I was going out of town for a little bit, it would just be the one thing that I'd be like, oh my gosh, I haven't done that in years. Oh, this is a big trip. Let me, you know, being in this business, you just kind of kick yourself if you don't have your ducks in a row. So that was always the time where I would be like, I've got to update it. Just take your smartphone and open drawers and, you know, open closets and, you know, just make sure that you have that record so that if something did happen, if while you were gone, there was, you know, if there was a fire from your neighboring apartment or something and you weren't there when everything happened, that you would still be able to recreate all of your belongings for an insurance claim. And then again, here's the sublimits that I was talking about. These are typical. In each policy, they might have different limits. But if something sticks out that you have something that it might be a little higher in value, that is something that you would want to, again, schedule and add on to your policy. And then unfortunately, there is a limit on money so that, you know, they will only pay you $200 no matter how much is under your mattress. The other important bucket of coverage in renter's insurance is called your loss of use or additional living expense coverage. And this is your coverage D. So it is a pot of money that you can access that covers your extra expenses due to losing your rental. The thing to keep in mind, though, that this is often paid out on an as incurred basis, meaning it's reimbursed. So if something happens and you have to go to a hotel for the night, after so fire in your apartment, they're putting it out, but it's the middle of the night. Where are you going to sleep? If you go to a hotel, just keep in mind that you will have to send the bill to your insurance company, file your claim, send the bill, then they'll reimburse you. So there is a little bit of lag time before the money starts flowing. But you don't want to necessarily go to the Ritz-Carlton if you're going to have to make that loss of use coverage stretch for a long time. This is always we've worked a lot with the Red Cross about how, educating their a disaster action team about, what happens even if someone has insurance, and if there's a fire in the middle of the night, they likely don't have their keys, they likely don't have their wallet, their credit cards. How are you going to get a hotel room? So asking them in the moment, do you have insurance? It really, it doesn't matter as much. So, the more loss of use coverage that you can buy, the better, because it will give you a cushion to figure out what your next steps are. And that's the important thing. Coverage and limits vary by company. So that's why we want you to shop around, because you may have a dollar amount limit, you may have a time limit in your policy. So you would have to spend it by a certain amount. Like sometimes in Colorado, we've seen policies that say, you have this amount of money, but we're really only going to cover you for 2 weeks until you have relocated somewhere. And then sometimes it's an actual sustained loss, which means no money limit, but again, in the fine print of the policy, there may be a time limit. And that's a really important piece because it takes a long time to find, it might take you a while to find a new apartment. And so communicating with your insurance company that you are, you're still trying to find a new apartment and that you are still in temporary housing while you're using those benefits is an important piece. They pay the ALE benefits, so additional living expense benefits, they pay for you to maintain your standard of living. So, if you were renting a 3-bedroom apartment, you do not have to cram your family into a studio apartment or a 1-room hotel room just because your insurance company is pressuring you for anyway. So it helps you maintain your standard of living, but again, it's so important that you know what's in your policy so that you can make a good decision on where to set up. So again, paying for a hotel room is one thing, but if we're talking about additional living expense coverage, it doesn't pay. If your apartment is damaged and you don't have to pay your rent anymore, your insurance company is not just going to pay for rent in another place. They're going to pay the increased amount. So if you rent a place for $1,500, but now you're staying in a place that's $2,000, you will only get an extra $500 for your insurance. So that's an important point. So especially in areas that have seen rents go up, there will be this increase. It's really good for you to figure out how much your rent is now, and then just see what's out on the market right now and see what is that difference and how long, how much money would you need to be able to stay in the area until you figure out what your next steps are. And then evacuation expenses. This additional living expense coverage will kick in if you're required to evacuate your rental if there is something nearby, like a fire or something, and there is the civil authorities are requiring you to evacuate. Okay, so whether or not you're buying insurance for the first time or going into your insurance agent after this training and saying, I think I just want to follow up and see how it's going, it's really important to take notes during that conversation to make sure that your insurance agent and you are on the same page. Communicate your insurance goal to them. Say, I'm nervous that if something did happen to my apartment, I want to make sure that I have coverage so that I don't have to move my kids in the middle of the school year, or I don't have to move too far away from my job. Like how much coverage can I get? Finding the fine print of your additional living expense coverage, replacement costs for your belongings. Those are important points. So we're going to give you some questions to ask your insurance agent, and then you want to follow up. And it can either be just like snapping a copy, like a picture of your notes and sending it to them, or just following up with an email. But having that paper trail is a really important part of the process. So those questions to ask your insurance agent. What causes of loss are covered in this policy? How long will my additional living expenses be covered? And is there a dollar and/or time limit? Is my personal property covered for replacement cost coverage? What's my current deductible? What discounts, do you offer, and do I qualify for them? So those are some main questions that you would want to ask. And then also, again, if you are in a flood zone, or close to one, you want to ask about adding flood insurance. So you don't have to necessarily be in that flood zone to need it. About 40% of flood claims were outside of these really high risk areas. So I did see, if you are on the first floor, this is an important piece. This is especially for you. So ask your agent about adding flood insurance. At least get a quote. It can never hurt to get a quote. And then it's really important to update your safety net as well. So there are certain times, that you would want to review your coverage. You'll get your insurance renewal every year. So you buy, one policy each year. And so like if you have the same insurance company for 20 years, you've really just bought that 1 year of coverage 20 times in a row, the same thing. So it's important to, have these conversations with your insurance agent and update your safety net, especially if you move or if someone moves into your home. That's an important piece, because if you are not related, so if it's not just your husband, if it's someone else, you can add their name to your insurance policy. And you would have to do that for any of their belongings really to be covered. If you work from home or participate in the shared economy, whether it's Airbnb or something to that effect, you really want to make sure that you look at the fine print in your policy and see if you need to add an endorsement or add anything to make sure that you're covered, especially for liability. And then again, if you get married, separated, or divorced, you'll want to update your insurance for that. And if you get a dog, it's really important to keep in mind that some insurance policies have specific breeds that they do not cover. So ideally, before you get a dog, you would just look to see if your insurance company covers that dog. And if you didn't have that foresight, just check your policy and see if their breed is excluded. And if it is, maybe shop for insurance that does cover it, just in case. It's all about just preparing for that worst case scenario. And then tips for reducing the cost of insurance without reducing the coverage. You can also always raise that deductible. So you can ask them, for renter's insurance, I'd say, $1,000 and $5,000 are really high levels of deductibles. More like, the standard may be $250, and you'd want to raise that to $500. And then checking your CLUE report is an important piece too, because with your CLUE report, if you had filed a claim in the past, it will be on your CLUE report. So it's kind of like a credit score, except for insurance. And just checking to see if all the information is correct will help you in the future. So that's an important piece, because the more claims you have, a lot of times the higher the cost of insurance is. So if you clean up any errors that may be on your CLUE report, your insurance costs could go down. And then saving on your auto insurance, we just wanted to include this because we know that, these are unprecedented times in COVID. So if you are driving less now that you're working from home or something to that effect, not driving your kids to school if they're at distance learning at home, you can contact your insurance agent when you're doing your insurance checkup and ask them if there are any discounts now that you're driving significantly less. That's an important one. And then again, with your auto insurance, you can also raise your deductibles and then think before you file a small claim, especially if, we always want you to file a claim if someone was hurt or injured, but if we're talking just about, like a baseball through glass or something, very simple, a lot of times our reactions are like, oh my gosh, I should file a claim. Take a deep breath in, a deep breath out, and think before you file a small claim. And then we just wanted to let you know about your Colorado Division of Insurance. They have consumer resources and links. This is the agency that regulates insurance in Colorado. So they have, COVID consideration bulletins. You can ask them questions. It is, it's one of those resources similarly to our organization where you may not know about them until you have some sort of insurance issue. So it's always good to know who to turn to if that happens. And then we always like to end with, a few claim tips. So if something does happen, if you do know someone who is affected by the recent wildfires or someone, has a big claim, the main things you do are to request a complete copy of your insurance policy, to find out what your loss of use benefits are, start a claim diary, just start taking notes, saving receipts. As we said, a lot of times you have to submit those receipts to get reimbursed for some of your benefits. Take lots of pictures of the damage if you can, and that's something that friends and family can help with too if it's too painful for you. And then, use our organization. uphelp.org is our website, and we have buying tips, claim tips, preparedness tips, anything that you would ever want to know about insurance. We are dedicated to this issue and being a resource for you. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'm very grateful for everyone who stayed on for this webinar, and we will be posting this both in English and Spanish, so you can spread the word again to your friends, colleagues, neighbors, anyone who has insomnia. We are very grateful. So I'm happy to answer a few questions. And again, thank you for sharing your evening with